Welcome to Devastating Workout Myths. I'm Richard Wolff, president of MEDFITNESS. We are a strength training studio located in St. Charles. If you want help getting stronger and healthier, visit medfitnessprogram.com. Today we're tackling common myths, workout myths that prevent people from strength training. It's reasons that people give for why they can't strength train and why they can't access the disease-fighting benefits that strength training has to offer. So we're going to dive right in on number one, and that is that people feel when they're trying to lose weight, they can't strength train because that's going to interfere with their weight loss. It's not going to help them to see the scale go down on a significant basis. Now, on paper, this seems to make sense. What we know about strength training is that it adds lean body mass, so it literally adds weight to the scale. It doesn't take weight away in and of itself. And so why would this not be a good idea, not strength training, when you're trying to lose weight? Let's look at a common case study, the average 60-year-old adult man or woman who has spent their entire life not strength trained, which is where most adults are, and they're now 60, so they've lost roughly 15 pounds of muscle tissue over the past 20 years. We start losing muscle in our early 40s at about the rate of a half a pound a year, and that rate of muscle loss accelerates as we hit our 50s and beyond to about a pound or more per year. So in 20 years, the average adult has lost roughly 15 pounds of muscle tissue. Now, if that person identifies themselves as being 20 pounds overweight on the scale, what that really tells us is that they've lost, of course, 15 pounds of muscle, but they've gained 35 pounds of body fat, not 20. If you're aging and you're not strength training, your lean mass, your muscle tissue is declining and your body fat is going up at the same time. Even if you stayed the same weight and you were the same weight 20 years later and you've not strength trained, you've basically lost 15 pounds of muscle and replaced it with 15 pounds of body fat. So the picture is worse than it appears, actually. And so when people initiate a weight loss attempt, it's easy to lose skeletal muscle. It's easy to lose more muscle tissue because weight loss itself is a catabolic process. It simply means it's a tissue breakdown process. Fats are being oxidized, they're being broken down, fatty acids are being liberated and used as a source of fuel, which is good. But the same thing can happen to skeletal muscle. We can begin to break down skeletal muscle and liberate protein building blocks and oxidize those and use those as fuel and burn those off as we're losing body weight. And so that's, of course, a terrible outcome because that further decreases that healthy, functional, lean mass, my muscle tissue. And so the best way to approach this if you're trying to lose weight and do it because you want to improve the quality of your life and be healthier is to always add strength training to your weight management lifestyle. If you're trying to lose weight, and of course anyone who wants to lose weight wants to keep it off, this needs to be a forever behavior. So adding strength training will of course minimize and prevent the loss of additional muscle loss, which is easy to have happen as you're in that weight loss program. But then it also adds the potential of rebuilding lost muscle and restoring lost muscle once your calorie intake is a little higher and better able to drive that muscle protein synthesis that is needed to build muscle tissue. So myth number one, wanting to lose weight is not a good reason to not strength train. In fact, it's a good reason to strength train because it will improve the quality of the weight loss. It'll help protect metabolic rate. It'll help protect functional capacity. It'll make physical activity easier long term. It does a long list of things to help you manage your weight, and it does a long list of things to help protect your health. So it never makes sense to not strength train when you're trying to lose weight. That's myth number one. Number two is that you have a sore joint. Let's say that you have a sore left knee and you've been diagnosed with osteoarthritis, and the doctor says, be careful with that knee, don't get too active, work around it, and so on, take some pain medications, and maybe you need to have a joint replacement 5 years down the road. Now, why is not strength training a mistake here? If we know movement can sometimes irritate osteoarthritic joints, Well, that's because your muscles are basically functioning as big shock absorbers. And so all the muscles in the leg, the upper and lower leg, are dissipating the ground reaction force when you walk. And what does this mean? That means that every time your heel strikes the ground, that force travels up the tibia, your shin, into the femur, into the hip, and up your spine. And so that force has to be dissipated, and it's done so through those weight-bearing joints. And so when we add muscle to our body, what we allow our muscular system to do is basically absorb and offload that force. And so adults who are living with osteoarthritis and weight-bearing joints like the knee report lower pain scores. They have less pain when they're exercising and they're strength training than when they're not doing those things. So that's good news. That's an immediate benefit. I can reduce pain scores. I can move around with less arthritic pain because I'm stronger, because my shock absorbers, my muscles are bigger and better able to do their job. But the other thing is that it also generally improves long-term prognosis. I mean, when you think about it, osteoarthritis is a degenerative disease. And so if I'm not doing anything, if I'm not active, I'm letting muscle loss accelerate, that only worsens pain scores and makes it harder to function, harder to move. So the Arthritis Foundation is really clear on this. They've stated that all adults need to exercise and they need to be strength training as a way of managing their osteoarthritis and preventing worsening of those symptoms. So the notion that you have a sore joint due to osteoarthritis is not a good reason. It's not a good scientific reason. It's not a good common sense reason to avoid strength training. So just the opposite. Adults with strength training, adults with osteoarthritis should be living the strength training lifestyle. And again, we see that with our clients at MedFitness. We've got dozens and dozens and dozens of clients who come in with arthritis and weight-bearing joints, and they're able to strength train safely and productively. Number 3 is this notion that you have high blood pressure and you don't want to further increase it by strength training. Now, this is an old school notion. If we go back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, sometimes physicians were actually telling their patients that don't strength train because that can raise blood pressure and put you into a danger level for someone who's already hypertensive. Now that's true, that could happen, but there are ways to strength train safely and to minimize the increase in blood pressure that normally occurs with any exercise. Any movement of your body will raise blood pressure, just like strength training will, taking a walk will. But what we want to do is raise it within a safe range here. We don't want to expect it to not move at all. So how do we do that? 3 basic steps. Number 1 is you need to breathe. This seems counterintuitive, but we have to tell people that they actually need to breathe while they're strength trained. It's very reflexive to sort of clamp down, hold your breath as you're exerting yourself, engaged in pushing and pulling movements of a strength workout. And so we coach clients to keep their airway open, to take in air, to breathe, to increase respiration rate as fatigue is climbing. And so that helps to minimize the increase in blood pressure that can occur when you close your mouth, close your airway, and really exert yourself through lifting and lowering weights. Number 2 is avoiding over gripping. And so particularly on machines like we have at MedFitness, you don't need to over grip the handlebars. There's a couple of movements where you have to have a better grip because you're pulling a weight, but everything else you can just have a grip that supports good posture and proper form. You don't need to over grip. So you really don't need to have a death grip on those handlebars as you're performing that exercise. You want just immediate grip to support wherever your body should be and stay during that exercise or movement pattern. So appropriate grip is another important factor. And last thing is the control of the environment. We maintain the air temperature at 68 degrees. So it's a temperature controlled environment year round. And that means there's no meaningful circulatory distress that is occurring because you're losing body fluids. In other words, sweating. If you're sweating profusely and blood volume is dropping, that in and of itself increases circulatory stress. So blood pressure goes up, cardiac output drops, heart rate goes up. All those compensatory changes to dehydration add stress to the vascular system and raise blood pressure. None of that is happening at MedFitness. I go through a very tough full body workout, 25 minutes twice a week. I work really hard And I'm never sweating significantly, if at all, during my strength workouts because we keep it at that incredibly controlled air temperature, allowing you to work hard, but work hard safely. So the end message here is that you can strength train safely and not push blood pressure up into dangerous levels. And we have many clients who are hypertensive, some on medications, some not on medications, who are strength training safely in our studio. Lastly, I do want to say there was a 2005 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Hypertension, actually, that tackled this issue. And what these authors concluded is that not only is strength training an appropriate lifestyle intervention to prevent high blood pressure, so it's an appropriate activity to prevent the onset of high blood pressure, it's also useful as a treatment. And so that would be analogous to taking a medication. I can strength train and help decrease blood pressure effectively and not see any dangerous or undesirable side effects because of that. So the tables have turned here, guys. If you have high blood pressure, you need to strength train for the benefits it provides. There's ways to do that safely. If you're not strength training, it makes sense to add strength training as a way of preventing that major risk factor for stroke and heart disease in your future. And lastly, the whole issue of having an injury. Again, many folks have historically said, well, I have an injury. Maybe that right knee is bothering you. And I got it evaluated and the doctor gave me some recommendations. And so I need to let that knee rest and I need to not overwork it and I need to be cautious. And now again, some of this makes sense. You don't need to overwork an area that is injured or irritated for some reason. But the bottom line is that we have many muscle groups in our body and we have hundreds of muscles. And so if you have a bad knee, I can assure you that we can train 90% of your body. We can get great benefits to every other muscle group. And in fact, it's very possible that we can even train the muscles above and below that joint with some different protocols that don't require the joint to move. So the notion that a bad joint or a joint injury should be the reason why I don't strength train is absolutely unscientific. It's counterproductive. We know that when we train opposing limbs, we get some benefit to the other limb, and we also improve the general health of your muscular system as overall. So there really isn't a valid reason why you shouldn't strength train other than post-surgery. Of course, there are circumstances where individuals need to not engage in strength training. But think about it, if you're in a hospital, if you just had a joint replacement, what's one of the things that they want to do as quickly as possible following that surgery? Again, understanding you're in a medically supervised environment, what is one of the things they're trying to do as quickly as possible? They're trying to get you out of bed, on your feet, moving after just having a major surgery. So this reminds me of what a scientist recently said about bed rest for adults over the age of 50, that it can be literally devastating to our health. In 1 to 2 weeks, older adults can experience as much muscle loss as they would have lost in a year. So this argues in favor of movement. This argues in favor of smart, intelligent, evidence-based strength training as a way of keeping your body and musculoskeletal system healthy, functional, and disease-resistant as much as we can. And it can be done safely. It can be done efficiently. That we know. So in the end, there really aren't good reasons to not strength train. What I'm going to argue is that most of the nation, about 90% that isn't strength trained right now, needs to look at this and say, boy, I think there is an opportunity to make my life better, and adding strength training to your lifestyle is one way of doing that. Thanks for watching today, guys. I hope to see you next time. If you want help getting stronger and healthier, visit medfitnessprogram.com.